Again, welcome everyone to the Data 3 Cisco Meraki training event, the first in a series of 4 of the Cisco Meraki Network Readiness series. I want to introduce you to the presenter today, Scott Williamson from Cisco Meraki. Scott's been in the networking industry for the previous 24 years, originally starting in a state government-owned entity, and for the last 10 years, Scott's been with Cisco and Meraki. He's going to be presenting to you today switching and security to the edge, and I'd like to hand over to Scott now. At the end there'll be a section for questions, and we'll look forward to answering those at the end of this session. Scott, over to you.
All right, thanks a lot, Simon. Everyone, welcome to this little session, couple of series just to really lay down, the basics of Meraki, and then sort of cover just little bits and pieces that you wouldn't expect to be done inside the Meraki dashboard or on the products as well, just to let people understand that it's more than just what we sort of get tarnished with as a small medium business. Product is what a lot of the enterprise features are and how we'd use those in there. So this week we start off with session 1, which is all just going to be a bit of a background of what's Meraki's mindset inside the Cisco portfolio. How we approach the problems and solutions, because we're not the solution for everything. So it's all about simplicity and that kind of stuff. And then we'll just cover a bit on switching inside there and what we're doing around some of our switching innovations and how they look in real life. So there'll be live demo in there as well to run through that. Simon said use a Q&A panel to ask questions. At the end, if you've got want to verbalise some questions, we can have a chat then if we've got time, or we can reach out to the team. And as you know, if you don't know, I'm based in Queensland, focused on our state, so it's all about what's good for us in there. So the first thing we'll talk about is Meraki's mission. So every company has a mission. They're all different. Some of us know what they are, some don't. The Meraki mission is always used, is what we run every product decision by. And what it lives and breathes by. So Meraki is all about simplifying powerful technology to free passionate people to focus on their mission. So what that means is that we take super complex ways of doing it. We try and make that as simple as possible in our dashboard without making it overly complex with too many drop-down boxes and radio buttons and CLI templates and that kind of stuff. We get rid of all that, make it nice and simple to free passionate people. So that's the people in IT who are there to keep the lights on, but also they're probably better utilised most of the time, talking to the business about business problems and how we can solve those with IT inside there. So we try and, with the Meraki dashboard, the intention is to, take care of that day-to-day simplicity, the templating, the ease of management, bring up the people in IT to go off, talk to the business about business problems, which is really about the mission of the organisation that you work within. I don't believe too many companies create, an IT department to be the best of breed IT in the world, leading the whole company. If they're like in certain industries, it's what's the focus on that industry. That's the outcome, the mission of that. The technology that simply works is really about our back end and how we do a lot of smarts inside there to understand how our hardware and our software work together and how our software works on our hardware to make that much better for customers. So, firmware quality, software quality, hardware quality are all information that we collect in our back end, and we can understand how that's running in the environment. And then some of the other technology side of that is then what do we do about that to make it run the network better? How do we, help a customer with actionable insights on their dashboard to say, hey, we thought we had a wireless issue over in this corner. We thought we had an issue with our radius servers. Bang in the dashboard, here is the problem. So, you probably heard of it in the industry used by marketing terms such as machine learning and artificial intelligence and those sort of things. It's really what Meraki was built on a long time ago, pre-acquisition of Cisco, and what it is today. And that's that rich data set which we use to make our products better in there. So that's that little bit done. So the guiding principles inside there, as I talked about in there, is really around that simplicity, lowering the barrier, for expert IT level to be able to do those simple tasks in the dashboard, the stuff that we've been doing for years, that should be automated and orchestrated in there, which then, leads to organisational impact where, IT can now have a seat at the boardroom table and those things, because we're providing business value inside there, because the day-to-day stuff is just running. Intelligence, I talked a bit about before, is what we do in our intelligence in the back end, but we also provide a bunch of intelligence in the dashboard, a lot more data. The first thing I get with customers that roll out, a swag of Meraki in their environment is all of a sudden there's these issues which look like a Meraki issue. But what they'd never had before is, here's my logging in my dashboard, here's an alert telling me this, here's that visibility that I've been hoping to have for years, this application is performing bad because of my WAN uplink is congested. Those sort of things start to pop up in the dashboard really quickly, which become, what is really happening in the network. All those hidden failures and other knowledge of our network, is now actionable in the dashboard. So that intelligence we bring to there to make it easy. Versatility is really about, I create a network. So I don't actually configure devices in Meraki. I configure a network and I add devices to that network. So if I have a network and I add, and I configure it all for my wireless configuration, my switching configuration, I then go and add 100 switches to that or 1,000 access points to that. They all just do that function of the network. If one fails, or if I want to add more, I just add more or replace the one that's failed. It gets exactly that same config for that place in the network, because we're not configuring that device, we're configuring that network function in there. So copy paste, I create a beautiful network, I have the config here I want it. I now want to create 1,000 of those. I can either clone that to be 1,000 more networks and add devices to it, or I can use templating or rich data sets like our APIs to orchestrate that. So that's a versatility, copy paste, make it quite simple. And then there's the invested that we do around our support side of it, where every Meraki device includes support. We want people to contact support probably earlier on in the stage, rather than just go and collect everything, create all my logs, create a big zip file with the terabyte of captures, send it off to a support organisation to then triage that problem. With Meraki support, we're there to hold the hand as we find a problem. We go, oh, I think this is a problem. Let's go and create a support case. Let's triage it through with that. Why I go and fault find it myself as well to go, oh, it's not a Meraki issue, close the case, or the Meraki guy in support is helping me triage that now, using the dashboard tools and training on the job, sort of training on how to use automatic packet captures in there, how to understand what some of those actionable insights are if people don't understand inside there. As well as constant improvements in the dashboard, which we'll talk about in a second. The portfolio today of the Meraki products, which we just added another one a couple of weeks ago, are these guys here. But really what Meraki is that dashboard. So this guy over to the right here, the dashboard is what the power is. And then obviously we have to have boxes on-prem, to do that function. It's a bit hard to have a wireless network without an access point. We haven't quite worked out how to, deliver that functionality from the cloud yet. Once we get wireless power sorted out, harness lightning, we'll be able to do that. So the products there today are the MRs, the access points or radios, the MSs, switches. Inside of the MX, the SD-WAN, security, routery type appliance that does everything else doesn't do. X for X Factor. The MG, Meraki Gateway or Cellular Gateway inside there. Meraki Insight, which is a deeper analytics view on what's happening on my MX inside there to understand application experience monitoring from an end user's point of view, or as I always like to call it, how to prove innocence quickly from a network guy's. Systems Manager, which is a mobile device manager, which has linkages into all the other products. So with Systems Manager, we can do a thing called Sentry, which allows us to, do a NAC style approach without having to have any back-end servers or that sort of functionality. We can have a Systems Manager agent on a mobile device, and we can automatically authenticate that onto a wireless network or a switching network without having to, do a full implementation of a radius and 802.1x and those sort of things. And there's a lot going on there as well. MV, our video or smart camera portfolio, also called CCTV, but it's more about the intelligence. We'll talk about that one in another series, but there's a lot of richness in there, which is the whole idea of these cameras recording video is to never actually look at the video to provide those, again, insights from the business and what's going on, make it simple. And then the recent addition is MT, Meraki Things, which is an IoT sensor, to be added to the environment that harnesses the back-end capability of our MRs and our MVs to connect those devices in seamlessly and simply without having to go through a convoluted process of turning on a sensor, with a full trust chain on security inside there. And we'll cover that when I talk about the MVs in a couple of weeks' time, about what we're doing there and that kind of stuff, where you can go and Google it now and all the fun of me presenting it. But inside there, so that's the portfolio today and what we're doing. So, you know, the Meraki Cloud is all about, you know, secure out-of-band management. So we're not about putting all the data up in the cloud and managing it up there and making all the decisions up there. It's about doing all that at the edge of the network in the devices on there, but using the cloud to mega scale that configuration, ease of management inside there. So no user data flows through our cloud, which is quite key. We don't want customer data in our cloud, you know, for privacy reasons. PII sort of makes us unusable in a lot of industries, especially government agencies inside there. So to that point, if the cloud actually goes down, which it does have a 99.99% uptime, the devices keep functioning and doing what they've been configured to do, and just continue that on. I'm pretty sure if you've got an internet outage or an upstream outage, you're going to be more focused on fixing that than adding a new SSID to your wireless network or changing your 802.1x configuration on a switch, for example. Cloud scaling, we look after that in our back end. So whether it's, you know, 1 access point or 10,000 access points or 10,000 switches or 20,000, we don't really care. It's all scaled, it's all managed inside there. You don't have to water and feed the back end, it's all managed by us. You don't have to install it onto a VM running in Azure or AWS and then have to change the size of the appliance when you get to a certain capability or patch it yourself. That's all looked after by us. That's all that evergreen simplicity inside there, which then leads to the future proof of adding features and functions and capability constantly adding different innovations to the dashboard. We add more capability, features, functions, more, you know, visibility into what that data is doing. You know, feature requests, our Make-A-Wish program that's in every dashboard page, linking that into there as well. There's a bunch of information on that URL there, which is meraki.cisco.com/trust, which talks all about, you know, what we do to make this as secure as possible. From a Queensland government point of view, we've done all the Meraki audits with the team in there. You know, it's been passed for everything. We've got a fair footprint in different agencies and councils, so we've been through a lot of that process. But if you have questions about that, it's either going to be answered there or you can ping the team, and we can work through any audit or whatever requirement processes to keep security and compliance happy. Size and scale, the Meraki Cloud. So currently these are the published numbers. They're always bigger than this, but 2.5 million customer networks managed from the Meraki Cloud. Over 7 million devices online. I think it's close to 10 now. 100 million external API requests a day, which is pretty big, and probably our biggest growing area of dashboard, where if I was presenting this 6 months ago, I was probably saying 25 million API calls a day. It just keeps growing as more and more people use that functionality for, you know, integration of other systems or whatever, you know, like integrations off to ServiceNow or pushing logs to Splunk or, you know, creating your own little management UI or using reporting out of Google Sheets to that kind of, you know, to understand, to pull data out of the Meraki dashboard in the way you want to have it. 150 million daily end users on the network, and, you know, splash pages served out of our, you know, custom guest splash pages is about 250 million a day. By far the largest cloud managed network platform, you know, around. I talked a little bit about APIs there. So we have the comprehensive cloud solution. We aim for that 90% of use cases in our dashboard, which is the www side of this, the outer box. Just plug it in, turn it, use it, and use all the functionality inside there. And if you want to do something that's outside of that capability, hey, I'd like to have a custom report that does this, then that's where I'd use the API to suck that data out and then manipulate it and use it how I want. Or, oh, your templating is great, Meraki, your network configuration is great, but I want to use it in a different way to link those together. And that's where we can use API to orchestrate and manage that environment there. As well as when we do location analytics for tracking, all that API is a feed out of there. All our logs, what you'd probably think about as alerts, can be sent out by a thing called MQTT, which is, a web function inside there. All our video analytics, exposing that to external. We don't charge extra for that. That's included as part of the dashboard license for the device in there. So that's the marketing bit at the beginning, just to set the scene. I won't be doing that for every session, so don't join however many minutes, 15 minutes late for the next session call. I'm not going to talk about that again. I'll just talk about the mission slide, and then the rest of it won't be covered. It'll all just be straight into product, because getting a lot of these sessions into 45 minutes to an hour is a struggle as it is. So switching, we'll talk about switching. I'll just cover what we do inside here first. So there's a pretty big portfolio of switches inside here, and we focus on access and distribution or aggregation layers of the network is where we'd focus on with Meraki switches. All our switches have full QoS, QoS DSCP mapping, layer 7 application visibility, which is across our whole portfolio. We do a thing called virtual stacking, where I talked before about putting 1,000 switches into a network. We would then call that a virtual stack inside there. And inside that network, we can actually have physical stacks. Stacking is included in every switch model in Meraki, except for the lowest, the MS120, and the highest, the MS390, which has, no, it's included in all of them except for the MS120, sorry. I was thinking of something else. Multi-gig options inside the portfolio there as well. All of them have remote cable packet capture and remote cable testing straight out the dashboard inside there. Obviously, we're from 8 to 48 ports, non-PoE to full PoE. All our non-PoE switches don't have a fan, so they're quiet. Our 8 porters don't have a fan, so they're quiet. All the rest that have PoE in either a light or a full form factor of PoE have fans inside there, and then they're all various depths. The fiber aggregation switches are from 16 to 32 ports. Every switch is designed as full non-blocking inside this. We don't oversubscribe our backplane in any switch. So if it's got 48 1 gig ports and 4 10 gig ports, then add all those together. That's the minimum forwarding packets per second in the background in there. Just run through the portfolio here in a bit more detail. So the starting area or the simple layer 2 switches that we have inside there. And remember, these are all cloud managed and have all those other functionalities. So the MS120s, 125s basically don't do layer 3 in any function. They're a layer 2 switch only. They have the options. The MS120 comes in non-PoE, light PoE, full PoE, small form factor, desktop form factor inside there. Anything that's a 120 has a 1 gig uplink, 125 has a 10 gig uplink. So then we have the MS120, 24 and 48, or the 125, 24 and 48 ports. Again, non-PoE, light PoE, full PoE options. The 125 has 10 gig uplinks, the 120 has 1 gig uplinks as a difference, and they're included in there. No stacking on the 120s. The 210, 225 is basically the same switch. The difference is that the 210 has, what did I say, 224? 210 has 1 gig uplinks and the 225 has 10 gig uplinks. That's the only difference inside there. They both include 80 gig stacking in there. You just plug a stacking cable between them. You can stack 210s to 225s. They include layer 3 static routing on these devices. Start to get layer 3 function. Now, we mightn't use that layer 3 function for routing, but when we've got layer 3 functions in there, we can start to do things like dynamic ARP inspection, a bit more multicast routing and all that sort of functionality on them because we've got that engine in there that we can unpack the packets and do a bit more with them. They have the optional redundant power supply, that sort of big ugly plug on the back of them for doing redundant power supply externally on those guys. And then we go up to probably, where we more see in enterprise switches. So sometimes we'll see 120s on desks or 120s or 125s in remote little sites where I just want to get a switch with PoE, get it out there. 210, 225, on the edge as well in small branches and sites where I need those layer 3 dynamic ARP inspection and security functions inside there. Now we get into what we typically see in a corporate office, which is the 250s, which just sit in there, 10 gig uplinks. All the switches I've talked about are 1 gig downlinks. There's no 100 megs. Options again of 24 or 48 ports, no PoE, light PoE or full PoE on those guys. 80 gig stacking as well, and they stacked with other 250s, and that's it. Layer 3 routing, and we start to introduce OSPF at this point in there as our standards-based routing protocol, and they have a modular power supply option. So they come with one power supply and a second slot for a second power supply. The 350 just ups that a little bit more, where we have 160 gig stacking, then more layer 3 functionality with OSPF again, so bigger routing tables, introduce modular fans inside those guys. In the 350, there's one model called a 24X, which has 8 PoE ports on it that can be used as well, and can stack with the rest of the 350s. 160 gig stacking, so different stacking cable to the previous 200 series. And then we go to 355, which is was the top of our range, which is really designed around multi-gig and UPoE and lots more UPoE inside there. 400 gig stacking inside these guys, and the same modular power supplies and fans. I think really exciting to talk about those guys. Aggregation layer, we have 1 gig aggregators, being the 410s, which are in 16 or 32 port flavors. So 1 gig SFP downs, 2 or 4 by 10 gig SFP uplinks, 160 gig stacking. Stacking's included. You can stack these within their same model. Same layer 3 routing capabilities as a 350. So full routing with OSPF again, modular power supplies, modular fans. The 425, we introduced 10 gig downlinks. So all the SFP ports on here are all SFP plus, and then QSFP uplinks for 40 gig uplinks on these guys. They have a thing called 160 gig flexible stacking, where we use the front ports to do stacking on the cables, on the devices, or they can be uplinks, stacking ports or uplinks. And this is to do with the non-oversubscription mode of these switches, is that we didn't have enough stacking, enough power in these, or there's not enough backplane to do both stacking and uplink. And then when you look at a stack, if you're doing more than one anyway, you're probably going to have more in there. We can dedicate uplinks off each device in the stack. Much deeper buffers on these guys because they're 10 and 40 gig and that non-stacking approach. And then the 450, which is all about 40 gig aggregator. So there's the 16 ports of 40 gig. Down on those 2 by 100 gig QSFP 28 uplinks, and then backplane in the back stacking of 400 gig stacking inside there. So we now don't reuse the front ports for stacking. That's dedicated stacking ports. Obviously, modular power supplies and fans. These are your aggregation switch in your whole portfolio. So what we launched about 6 months ago was a thing called the MS390, which is sort of new for Meraki to go to a modular switch where it has modular uplinks, obviously the modular power supplies, stacking built in, and it includes power stacking and that. So this was introduced just recently, and it gives us a whole heap of other functionality inside there. So the problems that we see customers facing is around security and minimizing vulnerability and exposure to my network, and trying to do things like multi-tenancy or micro-segmentation inside their networks, making sure that we can compliant from a security point of view right to the edge of the network, and guaranteed inside there. So all our switches do all 8.1x, they do all that kind of stuff, but we don't have all the deep richness of, say, the Catalyst portfolio in there for doing a higher level of security in there. Focusing on things like device quarantine, threat containment, which again we can do with change of authorization on all the other switches with 802.1x, but now we've got to be able to enhance that to some point of view. Securing IoT devices on the network, and then obviously the complexity and integration of using a non-Meraki switch. Hey, I like that simplicity and that ease of management. I want to have this in a Meraki switch, which is the problems we saw inside there. So Meraki's providing customers with security, visibility, and control from the network edge to the endpoint. We've got systems manager, we've got the switches, access points in there. On a nice, easy to manage ecosystem. That's there, what we call our full stack inside there. So the MS390 is obviously the answer to all these problems. Where we've introduced a lot more MGig and UPoE on these guys. We've introduced a feature called adaptive policy, which is what I'm going to focus on today, which is about micro-segmentation of users and devices, but done in a really simple way, where I don't have to go and install half a rack full of servers before I can turn my first switch on. A lot more stacking capacity to cater for the upcoming demands really of Wi-Fi 6 as we roll Wi-Fi 6 access points out, and as client devices support Wi-Fi 6. Modular uplinks inside there, where we can have 10 gig uplinks or 40 gig uplinks. We can change that module in them, which is means we don't have to have so many different SKUs from our point of view. We can have one SKU for the switch and then the uplink, or you can have a 2 by 10 gig uplink today and move to a 4 by 40 gig uplink in the future, or whatever modules are released later on. Stack power as well. We have all that UPoE inside there, and we don't have enough power supplies in the switch. One switch delivering that much PoE out of those ports. So stack power allows us to use the whole power across the stack, all the power supplies in the stack, to share amongst all the switches. Nothing new to the Catalyst world, new to the Meraki world, and much improved physical stacking with much faster failovers in the existing portfolio inside there. If that's needed in a business, you got to think about consequence and likelihood. The likelihood of having stack failures all the time are very low, and what's the consequence? Is it a 10-second outage or sub-second outage in there? What's the impact in my business? So what makes the MS390 so special? So the MS390 is built on the Cisco U80P chip inside there, which is the first sort of custom ASIC used inside the Meraki world. Everything to date has just been standard industry silicon. We're using that inside the switches, which allows us to unlock all that power of Cisco custom ASICs inside the switches, with the power of the Meraki dashboard to make that simple, which is all about trying to deliver that simply, like I said, without having to install half a rack full of servers or maybe a whole rack inside there. That's the biggest difference inside there, and it's the first switch in this journey from our point of view. So how can we solve these problems about microsegmentation, all those security issues we have across networks and the likes? Well, it's adaptive policy is the term and what we're going to talk about there. So what adaptive policy allows us to do is apply policy to the switch port at the edge in a dynamic and easy to manage way, either with back-end authentication and that kind of stuff, or just straight in the dashboard to make it simple. Identity and policy is based on a thing called tags or scalable group tags. You might hear them called security group tags as well, or SGTs. Now that's been industry standardized from there, which is why the move from secure group tags to scalable group tags inside there. It uses inline SGTs inside there, which means it then fits into an existing Catalyst core world or a Catalyst world, or interacts with other devices that support SGTs, which is more than just Cisco in that ecosystem as well. Org-wide policy, so we're not doing policy per network like we would do with a group policy inside Meraki. It's you create a policy from a whole network and then just say which networks I want to apply that policy to. It's based on intent. Hey, I want this user type contractor can only get to my proxy server and my internet. I apply a policy as he's authenticated on the network. That's all they can do. I'll cover some of those use cases when I show a real view of this kind of stuff, and provides micro-segmentation with inside VLANs, because to date we just do VLAN-based authorization. Hey, this guy's here, he's this person, put him in that VLAN. But now if I want to say, hey, that person at VLAN actually has different permissions than everyone else in that VLAN, I have to go and create another VLAN. So if we can use SGTs inside there or adaptive policy, I can then go and make that much easier. And flexible tag assignment, we can assign it in multiple different ways, which I'll talk about in a second. The supported platforms for this today in the Meraki portfolio is all our 802.11ac Wave 2 or Wi-Fi 5 Wave 2 access points, which is pretty big, pretty much majority of the fleet that's out there today, and all our brand new Wi-Fi 6 access points. I'll cover wireless in next week or the week after, and we can go through that portfolio there. And Wi-Fi 6 requires our latest MR27, which is our latest stable firmware anyway, GA firmware for the access points for that today. So there's nothing more to do. Add that, you get the functionality inside there. All the MS390 switches support adaptive policy only, so it's not supported on the other switches because we don't have the Cisco ASIC inside those to be able to manipulate that and use that. But I'll talk at the end about other ways to deliver a similar outcome inside there. So the MS390 introduces a new licensing tier for Meraki. So Meraki we don't do per feature licensing, we have tiered licensing. So we have enterprise license, and then we'll have an advanced license. So for both the access points and the MS390, if you don't need adaptive policy day one, then you buy the enterprise license and you get a great switch. And then down the track, you want to add that functionality, then you can just buy an advanced license just for the devices where you want to test it, play with it, get used to it, or deploy it, and then you deploy the advanced license to those. It isn't a whole org-wide license in this case. It's per network or per device, depending on the scenario. Happy to talk through that in detail. But we try and keep it nice and simple. It's not like, oh, here's my enterprise license, and I've got to add my insights license and my API license and then my adaptive policy license. We don't want to do that approach. It's just advanced license, or enterprise license. Nice and simple. The flexible tags can be assigned in multiple different ways onto the switches. These ways can be, statically assigned to a switch port. Hey, this, device can plug in a switch port. I just go and configure that switch port in the Meraki dashboard for that SGT, automatically tagged or anything that comes in there. A static assignment per SSID from a wireless point of view. Hey, this is my guest SSID. I just want to make sure it's always got this tagged assigned to that. So any traffic that comes in that or any user gets tagged with that. A similar approach there, but it's just static. And then dynamically assigned by a radius, where we can use a radius server, ICE or whatever flavor radius server to hand an attribute over to their part of 802.1x authentication. I'm going to give out, obviously I'm going to tell it username, password. It's going to come back with VLAN assignment, SGT assignment, and I just apply that to that user. And that means that policy can follow in the network. So much richer way of doing it, but not all devices support, full authentication, especially, sensory IoT devices or unknown guest devices in there, which is why the different approaches there. And then we can do static IP to SGT mapping. So we can say, hey, I've got an existing blob in my network, which is my guest network, which can't support SGTs and all the ingress. So I'm just going to say this IP range gets this SGT mapping. So anything that fits inside there, or I'm implementing SGTs in this part of my network first. I want to say all my servers in my data center get this SGT mapping over in my network side, my user side of my environment, so that I can at least classify that, or certain servers or whatever, where we can start to map that, where we don't have to have SGTs going end to end to make easy migration inside there, or for legacy devices that are never going to get that functionality. It makes it nice and easy in there. So that's sort of explaining how the tag types are added and where they go to. But what our whole aim is to have this nice, easy, consistent policy, which I'll show you in the dashboard in a minute, where we can just say, hey, employees can get to employees, IoT devices can't get to IoT devices, but they can get to the IoT server. Employees can get to the IoT server to see, sensory data. The IoT server can actually get back to employees. It can get to the IoT sensors out there, and it can get to other IoT servers. And that's a simple policy, simply defined in dashboard, that then is enforced on the network to make that nice and easy in there. And then applied to the, we create the policy in dashboard, and then it's pushed out to devices at the site. So you don't even see that, but what that means is if dashboard isn't there, the policy is applied in the hardware on the site. You can reboot that hardware, the policy doesn't change, and it's applied right there. And this is more just, hey, all of this by the UI is also available in the API. So this can be, scripted and controlled if you want to modify it all from another system. Hey, I've got this, ticketing system. This person wants to get access to that, rather than having a workflow. Then you've got to go and log on to the Meraki dashboard, go in here, modify this to do that. Is you can just programmatically do that. Hey, here's a ticket, do this function, automatically sent to API, and then the modified add a new tag for this new contractor group type, and then give it this access inside my network. It can all be done either in the dashboard with the UI or via the API, so it's nice and open. From a networking side, where are SGTs and where are fitting inside here, and how's that do? So they actually fit as part of the CMD or Cisco metadata field under an 802.1q header. So therefore, 802.1q is a trunk, so it has to be a trunk in there. And inside that CMD field, the SGT option types and SGT tag is inside there. So that's where it is inside the network. The main point in here is that, the SGT consistency isn't carried over, an access VLAN or whatever. It's applied and then carried over trunks. There is a lot of, that's where the IP to SGT mapping makes sense, or tagging on an ingress port starts to make sense. When we talk about down the track, there's a commitment for us to carry this SGT from end to end over our SD-WAN as well. So therefore, if we apply an SGT on an end client at a remote site, then they go through our site and then they hit our SD-WAN, is that same tag is carried all the way through the network without having to do 802.1q trunks or making one big flat layer 2 network across the world in there. Yeah, so tag, tag is preserved end to end throughout the network. Is the main point here, where we apply it at the access point. That's carried through the switches, Now these are Meraki switches, which understand that if it was any switch that had a trunk, then that data is carried through, or catalyst inside there. So each switch in the entire path must support inline STTs inside there to do enforcement and that kind of stuff on there. Then we sort of think, okay, Scott, that's great. Let's go and get some of these Meraki MS390 switches, but we want to have, we've already got catalysts in the core and we're doing something inside there, or we're on an SDA journey. We're happy with Meraki access point to the network because it makes it really simple for someone else to manage, and we just want to look after our core network in there. What are we going to do here? So what we've brought out is a design guide to help make that nice and simple, and this is not an untypical deployment where we end up with a mega scaled core environment, which the Meraki aggregation switches don't do, and lots of access switches in there. So therefore we can use the features of things like the Catalyst 9500, such as software upgrades in service, and high density fiber, flexible stacking, all that kind of functionality. It can still stay in there, 2 devices managed inside there, and then the rest of the portfolio managed to the Meraki dashboard. To make that easy, there's a design guide that we've published inside there. You can just Google that, or you'll get access to this as well. And then inside an existing environment, say we do have a mixed environment of a Cisco TrustDeck domain or an SDA DNA center managed environment and a Meraki adaptive policy site. So at my head office, I've deployed a full SDA software-defined access from Cisco using DNA center. And then at my remote sites, I just don't want to have that heavy lifting out there, or it's going to be much easier to manage those with Meraki. We can have an adaptive policy domain out there inside there. Based on the STT markings, we can go to each dashboard and make sure they're married up and make it nice and simple for us to manage. That's a bit of a manual process and not really needed. So how do we synchronize these? Sorry, is in the back end of what we do with SDA or DNA Center for the policy is ICE, and ICE owns that policy from an STT point of view or a TrustSec point of view. In Meraki, the dashboard owns that policy. So what we've written is a Docker container that allows that synchronization, those policies between the 2 domains to make it nice and simple. So it's a 2-way synchronization, and then they can be kept in sync. So you have the same policy then applied all the way through. So I changed my policy on my DNA server. It's then pushed to ICE, synchronized across the Meraki dashboard and applied there, and same in reverse to make it nice and simple to manage. So we'll have a look at this in action. So I'll just jump into dashboard here in my environment. So you haven't seen Meraki dashboard. This is what it looks like. Bunch of tabs, a whole heap of information about sites inside there. What we're going to focus on here is this ADP STT network that I've got here. So inside this network, there's a couple of switches, which are MS390s, obviously, from what you've learnt before. That's inside that network with devices connected onto it. Also on this network, I have an access point, which is a Wi-Fi 5 Wave 2, MR53, a couple of MR53s, and I also have an MR30H, which isn't functioning that well because it's sitting on my desk here, not plugged in, and I meant to plug that in inside there. But we can see from there, what's going on, where we've got one guy meshed in here and all that kind of stuff. From an adaptive policy point of view, because it's organization-wide, which is what I talked about before, we have 2 tabs that apply to adaptive policy. The first one is network objects, which we're currently betaing for customers, which is what we use for that IP to STT mapping. And then we have adaptive policy in here. The adaptive policy dashboard, looks like this, and it's nice and simple to manage. Here's, the groups that I've added to here. If I wanted to add another group, just simply saying, hey, add a group of devices. I'm going to call that, what's a good, IoT air conditioning sensors, for example. Just as an example, I'm going to give that a tag of 406. These are the unique tags. Give it a description, and you notice we won't allow you to write to it unless you've given it a description. And then if I wanted to bind that with an IP to STT mapping, I would then go and select from here, a policy that's already written. Let me find one that they've already written inside, and that was that network objects, where we can then control an object rather than having manual IP addresses typed in here. We just have a manual IP addresses bound to an object, which could be automated in some way. And then if I modify that IP mappings in there, then it's automatically brought over to that IP to STT mapping. And that's how I'd do that with there, review changes and save. And that would then give me one of these objects in here. So that's defining my STT. Now, if I want to go and see what policies on my network, this is all my policies here, sort of read out like a firewall rule, where it says this tag can get to that tag, this tag can get to that tag, but it's custom inside there. If I want to go and have a look inside there of different devices, for example, I can just go show me all the corp, users and where they can get to. And here, corp user can get to internals allowed. It's denied for all my SCADA hosts. It's denied for admin. Corp users can't get to other corp users. They can get to my IoT cameras in a custom way, and my custom rule is HTTPS to device inside there. So I can easily see that in there. If I want to go and manipulate this policy, I go over here to add policies, and here I get a nice simple mapping of the SGTs to SGTs. So if I now pick, for example, the corp user again, then straight away I get a nice visual representation of what they can do. So all these red guys here is a deny, where I've ticked the box like this, and I've gone deny allow custom inside there. So down here in custom, if I tick this box, then I can say, hey, what's that rule set inside there? And I can see that corp users, which is tag 120, can get to IoT cameras, tag 402, for HTTPS to device. And here's my rule set down here saying only allow to TCP 443 on that. And that's just bound to that. So that's just writing my policy. This has done nothing yet because I haven't bound it to the network inside there. But you can kind of see the flow inside here and how it makes it easy to, to do those mappings. Either way, I can say, hey, what can get to corp guest? Well, actually, I've got some issues here because I've got a whole heap of devices that can get to corp guest. I need to go and, write a deny rule in the reverse direction, say to all these SCADA hosts, I don't want to get them to internal. I don't want them to get to any of that stuff. And then I just go, hard deny on that. And then I go and write that. I've just written that policy and modified that policy straight away to say, hey, corp guest, or those devices can't get to corp guest inside there. And that's, you can see that's been written in there now and updated. That's pushed then to the dashboard and then pushed out to the MS390s and the access points in there. So that's writing the policy and how it's defined inside there. This is where we define our custom access list, and this is how I turn it on or off for a network. So if I have a network such as this network here, and I want to turn adaptive policy on, I can just tick that network, enabled adaptive policy, and then that adaptive policy is configured, then pushed out to the devices in the network. And as long as I've got adaptive policy configuration in that network, it'll then start to bind that. I'll just turn that off because later on, if I play in that lab area and I've got that turned on, I'll probably have fun in there. Now, from a switch point of view, we talked about before how do I apply that policy there. So straight away, there's normal. I'm sorry, I'm just using tag user there just to bring up. I've got a bunch of ports that are tagged as user. I just wrote a quick query string there that just says, hey, show me the ports that are tagged as user. So then I can go and select those and then apply a policy. So here, these ports are configured, they're enabled, they're PoE enabled, they're actually an access port. I just want to try and lump these in the adaptive policy group corp here first. And then I've got an access policy of open here. I might have, an access policy of 802.1x on there as well, which means that if the device enters the network and they'll be tagged with 300, if they also then 802.1x authenticate on that network, and they hand it back a different tag, they'll get that tag overwritten inside there, but I have a base tag inside there. So you probably, sort of mark things as internal and then have an 802.1x access policy then to modify that. Here's my VLAN assignments and that kind of stuff. Same sort of deal. If I'm using 802.1x authenticate, that would just overwrite that. So that's how I do, static port assignments inside there and across multiple ports. I could do it across the whole lot if I wanted to. Dynamic would be, just an 802.x configuration inside there. So that's it on there. That's it on there. From an access point of view, if I had, a wireless network and I wanted to then apply it to inside here, here I've got ADP operators as my SSID, for example. They've got no authentication requirements, and no splash page. They're natted to our Meraki DHCP range, which is pretty safe anyway. But here I can go and apply, the adaptive policy straight to that SSID. The same sort of deal. If I had this configured as, a typical WPA2 enterprise configuration there off to my Radius server, then I'd be able to, dynamically assign tags inside there too. But that's how we do it manually, dynamically. That's how we do it dynamically in there. In the wireless section, I'll cover some of the newer innovations we've done around identity PSK as well, in case you're looking at that going, oh, that looks pretty cool in there. That's sort of a run through of how it's configured in Dashboard with that nice, simple policy objects assigned inside there and a visualization in there. And like I said, there's no, this is all that's needed to do that in there. Then, obviously you're all asking, but what happens if I'm doing this on not an MS390? I can't replace all my switches with this MS390 that you talk about, Scott. What can we do there? Well, we can manage them with ACLs would be the answer down at port level, or Meraki switches don't support port ACLs. So we have to do them at the backplane level where we're going to be writing, VLAN ACLs on there. Not scalable, not sensible, hard to manage inside there. ACLs look really simple. They're really hard to manage. Having that granularity in a catch-all ACL is really hard on a switch, but it does provide us blocking really easily at the edge. Hey, I don't want to see this protocol on the network, block it. I don't want to see this IP range on the network, block it. It's blocked in the hardware on the switch. ACLs, like I said, cumbersome and thing. So what we're, introducing, it's currently in beta, is a thing called group policy ACL on all the existing switches, bar the low end switches, MS120s. So group policies, we define a list of rules and restrictions and other settings where someone can go, where they're allowed to go. The devices or ports or clients, change on how they treat on the network. So role-based traffic filtering inside there, so access lists are based on identity and applied to the network. It keeps our ACLs nice and short and easy to understand. This ACL, this policy is now called accounting users, and they can only get to accounting servers. It's that simple, and that's the way we'd write the policy, and I'll show you that as well. We can have them dynamically assigned via Radius, which is the first way we're doing this because it makes the most sense. But it's still centralized management inside the Meraki dashboard in a group policy for the whole network. You update the policy, it's updated in real time in there. So how does it work in our dashboard with this visualization? So basically, we write a group policy inside the Meraki dashboard, and it says sales can do this, HR can do that. That's it. We've written those policies up inside there as Meraki group policies. Those group policies are then pushed straight to the hardware again, and it's sitting in the hardware in a cat-like state of readiness to be applied in there. Modify it in the dashboard, it's automatically pushed down there again. The group policies are down there, and then we configure the Radius server. We're going to have filter ID is the attribute to be used inside there for the Radius for the user. So hey, user group sales has filter ID sales as the textual field inside that, or HR. That's assigned on the Radius server in there. So then the user just plugs into the network or logs onto their PC as normal. It's normal 802.1x authentication. We go off to the Radius server, we hand back those attributes. We then apply that policy to that switch port, which means that if that person's sales says can only go to here, here, and here, that's all they can go to. Nice and easy and dynamically assigned to the edge. So, think of it like downloadable ACLs, but, embedded in the switch and not requiring any other server to push that down apart from your normal 802.1x authentication process in there. I'll just sort of show group policy and dashboard first. So group policy and dashboard is a network-wide feature under group policy. And a group policy is what we use in the Meraki world to change what a network policy is. You have a network policy where I go and put access filters on my MXs, on my MRs, my access points. They have full firewall capability inside there. So I might be doing an ACL here on a switch, or an ACL here, or firewall traffic shaping on the access point. Or if I have a SD-WAN appliance, I'm doing it there. Then we use group policy to manipulate or change that from the network policy, where we can write to or change inside that. Here's one I've created called printers. In here, I haven't modified anything. All I've done is written a layer 3 file rule here. It says they allow printers on any protocol. I could go and select a protocol to this, /32, this IP, and to this one for full IP because they're my print servers. And then, somewhere upstream into my data center, I'm using ACI and applying endpoint groups and policy inside there. I don't need to apply the policy so rich in every spot on my network, but I just don't want these printers to talk to anything else but the print servers. I don't want any local printing to them inside there, so I'm just going to deny everything else. So there's then a printer connected to this network, and it's either assigned manually on the edge, or we use Readiness to authenticate that printer with Mac auth bypass, or if we're doing Mac-based authentication, or if we're actually doing 802.1x or certificate-based authentication of printer, we can apply that policy to there. And that's what the policy looks like, how it's easy to write inside there. But group policies are a super powerful thing. Like if this printer was wireless connected to the wireless network and got the same attributes, it would get the same group policy applied and much richer inside there. So that was sort of what I was going to cover today, going fairly fast. So I hope you were able to keep up with all that. And obviously, if you've got what are the next steps inside here. So the next steps really from a Meraki point of view is to try it. So Meraki has a great trial process. We send out brand new kit. People can try it. You've got, depending on businesses and types, between 14 and 60 days minimum to give it a go. It's brand new kit. If you love it, then we can just transact that through, with someone like Data3, certainly through to, hey, I'll put that in my network. I'll put it to this remote site. It's working well. I love what it's doing. I don't want to go and rip out that trial kit and put in another one because that's disruption. I just want to continue on with that. And that's sort of the ease of trial inside there. And that's something that's well worth doing. And like as a systems engineer, I much prefer customers to try stuff to be 100% sure it's what they want first, because then we don't have the whole oversold solution not meeting the customer requirements inside there. Now, keeping up to speed with all this, there's a bunch of webinars and capability online. This recording here will be available for you guys exclusively via Data3 as well. But we've also got Meraki communities there as well. So communities.meraki.com, which is a rich source of, fed and information inside there. And if you become the top community user each month, you get a bag of swag, and it's all answered on there as well. The next steps is post all these presentations is that, if you want to be contacted by Data3 to have a chat through this, and, go through that process and we can get all this going. It's pretty simple and seamless inside there. Or if you want to learn more, it's the best process for us to get there. That's pretty much all I had for that whole end-to-end. I hope I kind of encapsulated and made that as simple as possible, even though some of that was under the covers is quite technical. So I'm trying to cover the rich technical side and what's also simple in the dashboard as well, just to go, hey, it's not just simple products that do simple things. Quite a complex thing we just did then, done really simply. Let's give it a go.
Thank you very much for that. There's a couple of questions that have come up from some people here. One of them is, does Meraki provide additional intelligence on how the network is operating? i.e., does it provide forward warnings or steps to resolve issues?
Yeah, so part of what I talked about early on about, the cloud and the power of the cloud and us using that data that we collect for good and not personal identifiable information is all around, intelligence of what the network's doing. So, for wireless, for example, we had a capability called Wireless Health. It's now called Meraki Health because it's extending beyond wireless. We start to tell, the customer journey through the network from the client connecting to the wireless network through the switch, through another switch to the, SD-WAN or whatever, that along that path is Readiness functioning all the way along there, is, my DHCP functioning, all those sorts of things, so that we'll tell customer early, hey, this site has an issue with DHCP because its response times are 2 seconds. So let's bubble that up and tell people really, really quickly. And that's not including the rich visibility we have already of the applications that people are using inside that network, what's going on, and then controlling all that with the group policies. When it comes to SD-WAN, there's things like Meraki Insight, which gives us that end user experience monitoring inside there. But Meraki Health, which is across all the products, that's just included in the license. There's no additional, there's no tiers. The base license gets us that functionality.
Great. There's one other question here. Can I run a hybrid Cisco Meraki environment with Cisco DNA Center?
100%. So we talked about here about how we've got that Docker, that synchronizes the the policy, the TrustSec policy and the adaptive policy inside there. So that's one approach. With DNA Center, there's full integration inside there and a really rich roadmap to add more. Whereas you can quickly create a user in the Meraki dashboard, give it the permissions you want, create an API key, paste that into the DNA Center dashboard, then you get full visibility of your Meraki network and DNA Center with cross-launching, but you get intelligence there as well. So on a switch, you'll see switch port stats, what's going on inside there. And we've taken that one step further recently with SSID provisioning, where now if an SSID is provisioned inside DNA Center, it's synchronized across to the Meraki wireless world. And then where we're going from that is all around assurance. A lot of rich assurance data and insights. If we talk about Meraki, there's a lot of rich assurance data inside DNA Center assurance as well. And it's about bringing the Meraki assurance data into DNA Center, which is the next step of that journey. So certainly a lot going on there for that hybrid, because it's quite common to have some offices as DNA Center, for example, and then others let's just go and do Meraki there, or end to end. It really shouldn't matter inside there.
Look, thank you very much for part one of the 4-part series. Just reminding everyone that the next part starts on Wednesday, the 11th of November. That's next week at 11 a.m, covering next-gen wireless and controllerless architecture. Data 3 has around 40 certified Meraki individuals, and we use Meraki kit across all of our 9 locations in Australia. And we've also used extensively the API calls. So we've well and truly bought into the Cisco Meraki story, and we'd look forward to supporting all our clients and anyone interested in that in terms of sharing our experiences. We'll be in contact with all of the attendees of today's session, and as Scott mentioned, we'll pass you a recorded copy of the session so you can consume it afterwards, and be back in touch with you very soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks.